So, tell me about the look of Mama. How did that evolve?
Well, so back in the day, Carol and I, because we shot the show like a live show, Carol and I would get into full makeup, and back in those days it was 2 sets of upper lashes and a set of lower lashes. You'd put on your showgirl makeup, you'd change wigs and costumes, but you were pretty much done. And if you look back at the very, very early Mamas, here's this old lady, and behind those glasses are all these eyelashes. And my husband was the makeup man on the Carol Burnett show, and I think it was about maybe the 3rd Mama Eunice that we did that he said, hey, no kidding, we have to take 2 minutes to rip the eyelashes off and knock the rouge down, take the lipstick off, and it won't take long to put it back. But the first couple of very early ones are pretty funny if you look at all the eye makeup going on behind the glasses.
So what was Bob Mackey's contribution to the look?
Well, Bob was brilliant, and I say that I say this, you know, for Carol, he did those beautiful sequin gowns. For me, he did Mama. He did everything on that show. You know, he'd had scads of seamstresses, you know, making tons of costumes every week, and he did a magnificently detailed job of every single costume that he touched. And Mama was no difference. He had her nailed. I mean, I go out into Middle America now, and I see people, and I go, you know, Bob Mackey could not do it better. But he just is. He's got the details of real life down perfectly. And I mean, there were many, many times, and I know I've heard Carol say the same thing, that you couldn't quite get a handle on your character, you weren't quite sure who you were, and you'd go to wardrobe on Wednesday morning, and Bob would dress you, and you'd go, I know who I am. And that was Mama. I mean, he just had it down perfect. He actually built the body into a slip. So it's in one easy little piece. You just slip it on, zip it on. It's got a zipper down the front, and it's all the padding. It's all soft and lovely. And he had the dress, the perfect little polyester dress, the little gray wig, the glasses, the pearls, the earrings, the shoes, the socks, the purse, the sweater. He had every single detail. The only thing I did was to mush the socks down, because it reminded me of my own grandma, who's Southern Missouri, who's just like right down there perilously close to where we're talking about. And, you know, it just reminded me of Grandma. And I remember when I got completely dressed, and, you know, Bob's in front of you, futzing, and he stepped aside and looked in the mirror, and I remember going, good Lord, I'm dysfunctional. It was perfect, head to toe.
How long did it take for you to transform from Vicki into Mama?
It does not take me, well, you see, it takes not but a moment. As Harvey said, any character you really do well is a part of you.
But to get into the actual physical costume?
Oh, to get into the costume, it takes me much longer to look like Vicki. It's much more work. It's no work at all. And, you know, by the time we went to and did Mama's Family as a series, I was down to like literally no makeup. I feel like I was the only actress in town who were getting ready to shoot Go Get Ugly.
So it sounds like from what you're saying, that from the very first The Family sketch, they were called, you knew right away how you're going to go and what you're going to say, and I mean in terms of your style and
I think, well, you know, I was trying to do an older version of Eunice, but I would say that Mama she matured and got much deeper and more wonderful as a character as I found her and embraced her. I think she's gotten much better with age.
So who were some of the characters in those family sketches on the show?
Who were some of the characters?
I mean, at the beginning, who was in the family, the characters?
Oh, I think it was just us in the very beginning. Just Harvey, who played Ed, and Carol playing Eunice, and me playing Mama. Betty White came on eventually to play my daughter Ellen.
Was Ed was he a son of
Ed was Eunice's husband.
Oh, okay.
Her ne'er-do-well husband that Mama hated.
Okay.
Well, not sure she was in love with Eunice either. She was a mean old lady.
So the writers who created Mama, they weren't too happy with where it was going. Is that right?
They hated that she wanted to do it Southern. She thought it would. They said this is going to offend the entire southern half of the country, and Carol said, "Nope, this is where I feel it belongs." They hated that I was Mama and that she was Eunice. They pretty much hated everything we did with it. They came to the first run through. You know, we started rehearsals on Monday. On Wednesday afternoon, we would do a run through, which is the first time that the entire staff would come into the rehearsal hall to watch the show. And when they saw the sketch, the way we had done it, they were so angry that they threw down their pads and pencils and stormed out of the rehearsal hall. And they said in the production meeting afterwards, they said, you've ruined it. You can't do this. You can't. You're going to offend the South. You've ruined our beautiful sketch, our beautiful characters. And that's the way it went on the air because that's the way Carol wanted to do it. So, and, you know, as we all know, they got such a great reaction from the fans that they ended up having to write those sketches over and over again. It would take them like 6 weeks to write one of those sketches. And that was back in the day when it was typewriters. Mm-hmm. And you'd hear the typewriters going for, I don't know, for a week or so. And then if you walked by their office, you'd hear them screaming and yelling at each other. She'd do all the female parts. He'd do all the male parts. And then it would go for the next week, you'd hear the typewriters going again. And it would take 4 to 6 weeks for them to write one of those sketches. And Carol couldn't wait. She was like, when are we going to do another family?
So we know how the writers felt. How did the rest of the cast feel about those sketches and the Mama character?
Well, I remember Harvey saying to me, you got the character. She is the meat and potatoes of this whole deal. He said she is a real character. And he hated Ed. He didn't like playing Ed. Didn't feel that it was a great character.
So how did Mama evolve on the Carol Burnett show? And did you have input into that?
I think probably certainly as I got more, this is like midway through the run of the show, and I think by then I had a good enough handle on the characters that I would be given that I probably did have a lot of input. Yeah, and that's when I actually started to ad lib and blossom and turn into Tim Conway's protege, maybe a little bit.
How do you account for the great chemistry among the cast on the Carol Burnett show?
I don't know how that happens. I was reading about chemistry the other day, and somebody was talking about how it's some sort of a lightning in a bottle that you never know when it's going to happen. You can have people that are great friends that have no chemistry on camera, and you can have people that don't really care for each other at all, and they have wonderful chemistry. I don't know, but I don't know.
Did you have any favorite guest stars?
Well, like I said, I was kind of all about the music, but it was incredible to just to get to be near Lucille Ball and watch her work, or to even get to be near Rita Hayworth. And I remember she was rehearsing a Charwoman number with Carol for the end of the show when she was on, and we had all sort of dribbled into the rehearsal hall because it was run through day and it was late in the afternoon, and she was struggling with her little dance steps, and I was right in front of her, so I'm sure that's why she came to me and she grabbed me by the shoulders and she said, I don't know how you do this every week. And I said, Miss Hayworth, you ran up and down those stairs with Fred Astaire, get a grip. She said, but we had weeks and weeks to rehearse. Yeah, it was just, Sammy Davis Jr., my gosh. I remember when he was on one time, he didn't rent, but he said, I need the rehearsal hall after run through. And we all went down I need the stage after rehearsal. And after our 3:30 run through, we all went down to the stage, and his entire orchestra was there, and he did a show for us. Did an entire show for us. It was a pretty amazing place. I do remember being appalled by Tony Randall because I was so young and so geeky, and we had to kiss at one point, and I remember he just stuck his tongue all the way down my throat, and I was just everybody thought it was so hysterical, except for me, the little child geek who was just mortified.
I was just about to ask you any particularly embarrassing moments.
I was totally embarrassed by that.
Any other bloopers that maybe the general audience doesn't know about? That,
the general audience doesn't know about.
Or even that they do, that really kind of stand out for you.
gosh.
Did bloopers tend to get pretty much into the show? I mean, in terms of...
Yeah, I guess they pretty much did, unless something horrible happened and we had to stop camera, which was pretty rare. Yeah, I think that's why people so lovingly look back at that show, because you feel like you were there when you watch it, because you were. There's nothing fixed about it, you know.
Well, because we had that live to tape feel, did you try to stop from cracking up, or did you bite your lip, or did you just kind of go with the flow? How did you do it yourself?
Well, when I was young, I was too mortified, and we talked about that. I just didn't feel like I had really earned the privilege to do that. So I would keep it together because I didn't feel it was my place. And I was really not even sure what they were doing. I was still learning. So it took me well into that run to embrace the go ahead and have fun with it concept.
Tell me about the sketch you did, the Mama sketch, where you were, basically you and Tim Conway, you were bleeped. What was that about?
What, are you talking about the famous blooper?
Yes, I think so.
Which has had a life of its own, it was Dick Clark's favorite blooper for years and years and years, and I've said to the kids, you guys, I should have started the college fund with the money from that blooper, because he just plays it over, and he played it over and over and over for years. It was really the first time that Mama spoke out, I believe, and it unleashed a monster, God knows. But when we would do our afternoon show, the dress rehearsal, mm-hmm. And in between shows, you'd have time to get touched up, get a little snack if you needed it, and get notes from the director. So Dave Powers, our director, he would come by the dressing room somewhere during that hour and say, we're changing your mark in the dance number. We are cutting this line in this sketch. I need you to look directly into camera one on this, so you'd get your notes. Right. On this particular night, the night that we did that particular sketch, he knocked on my door. He said, I have only one note. The elephant story will be different, and good luck. And by now I am married to Al. He's the makeup man on the show. I said, damn it, how does Tim get away with this stuff? And Al looked at me and he said, get him. So I don't know. I don't know if it's Tim's fault. Maybe it's Al's fault that monster was unleashed. Anyway, we get to that taping. And Carol, when Mickey Hart was a character in the family, he was Harvey's partner at the hardware store. And when Mickey Hart got written into the sketches, Carol, knowing Tim and knowing what a little troublemaker he was, took us aside and said, listen, I feel very strongly about these characters. I do not want to break the fourth wall. We have got to stay disciplined. I really, really feel strongly about this. Well, so who loses it? Who loses it during the dress rehearsal and is in my face with tears coming down her eyes trying to stifle her laughter? And it's, the whole concept is we're playing password. And she keeps putting the thing under my nose going, go ahead, Mama, go ahead. And she's a mess. So I get the note during the break that the elephant story is going to be different and good luck. And Al says, get him. Well, we got to that same spot, and indeed, the elephant story was much longer and more convoluted, and Carol loses it again. And I'm just like, really, Carol? Really? You're the one who said. And she's in my face, and she's going, go ahead, Mama, go ahead, Mama. So I decided to get Tim, and I said, are you sure that little asshole's finished? And for those people who do remember that sketch, Tim went off one end of the sofa. It was the last season. It's Dick Van Dyke that went off the end of the other end of the sofa. I think the cameras were jiggling. And I think everybody was just, I don't know if they were relieved that Vicki had finally cut loose or, yeah.
So did that air in a bleeped format?
I don't know. That's a good question. I don't remember.
I thought that maybe it did, but...
I don't remember.
But it's had a life on its own, certainly in the blooper show.
It has had a total life of its own.
So you won an Emmy in 1979, Best Supporting Actress.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember what you submitted, what show or sketch or what?
Yes, I remember them putting together a show for me.
Okay.
because it's not really just for your body. You do at the end, for the judging panel, have to submit a single show. And I remember Carol saying to me at the end, I believe at the end of the Monday reading, "This is your Emmy show." So again, I'm going to just say she lovingly put together my Emmy show for me. I remember I had a little sketch all by myself. I know there was a family sketch. I'm sure there was music. But I remember her saying, "This is your Emmy show." And I remember sitting next to Harvey at the ceremony and them announcing the nominees. And Harvey saying, grabbing my knee and saying, "Get ready to win your first Emmy." My husband couldn't be bothered. He was sitting next to Dorothy Hamill, and he was so excited. Their little wedge haircut, he was so excited.
So how about you? How excited were you when they did call your name?
I was ready. Harvey had prepared me, so I was ready. But it was, needless to say, a thrill.
Were you ever given a character or a sketch that you felt like you couldn't pull off?
Oh, all the time.
So how did you approach that, or what did you do?
Well, like I've told you, I was a total geek, so I would just jump in with both feet and act silly and do what I thought, and then get some guidance if I needed it, or not. There were many times that everybody would say, "Oh my God, this is great." I remember one time, because I told you early on that I wanted to play the drums. And actually, my brother-in-law is a jazz drummer. Mm-hmm. And so I actually took a few lessons from him. So I can pretend like I know what I'm doing back there on the drums. And I remember we did some sketch where I had to play the drums. And everybody was laughing, just peeing in their pants watching me, because they said, it looks so real, it's hysterical. Well, yeah, I was into it. I was pretty sure I had it.
Did a live audience help you? Did that help your performance?
Oh, always. I say now that it's the way I grew up. It's what I know. So yes, I would say yes, it does, because that's what I learned.
What did you learn about, comedic timing doing Carol Burnett's show?
I have it.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how I got it. Like I said, maybe by osmosis, just by listening over and over again. There's I don't know. There's definitely a timing to comedy, isn't there?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess I got it through osmosis. Listen. I guess that would be my biggest thing. Listen.
So I'm going to mention some of the cast members, just maybe like a word association. Just give me a quick thought or anecdote. Or
okay.
Just a quick,
this is
as we go
really
through.
the deposition part.
Or maybe a favorite memory. No, just
okay.
And you don't even have to do this. But something that might just, the kind of the largest thing in your mind, starting with Carol.
Mentor.
Okay. Harvey Korman.
Teacher. Funny.
Do you remember the last time you saw him before he passed away?
Oh gosh, the last time I saw him before he passed away. Maybe, gosh, it'd been a while. Maybe we got a TV Land award for. That was maybe a couple of years before he passed away.
Mm-hmm. What do you think his legacy is in television?
Well, I said before, I think that he is arguably the best sketch comedian that ever lived. Not even sketch. I think of Blazing Saddles, and he was so blazing funny in that movie. Because there's a really fine line for Harvey between Shakespeare and comedy. And he knows right how to walk. He knew right how to walk that line, and I hoped helped teach me that. When we did Mama's Family as a series, when it went to series, we did, I think, 2 episodes, and I said to my husband, I said, "This doesn't feel right. It just doesn't feel funny." And I called time, and I said to Joe Hamilton, I want to bring Harvey in to direct, and Harvey came in and sat me down, and he said, "Okay, this is it's a great character, but he said this is a sitcom now, and you can't expect people to come home from a hard day at the office, pop a beer, and watch this woman every week scream and yell at everybody for half an hour. She now has to become a peacock. She has to become silly. She has to become funny. And I said, but how? He said she has to laugh. And I said, how do I do that, Harvey? She's never even smiled. She had, and prior to that on the Burnett Show, had never even cracked a smile. I mean, I would set that jaw, and that was it. And he said, but she is you. You are she, which, of course, is my husband's biggest nightmare in the world. But it was, you know, he really, I don't know, something about the lecture he gave me that day just sort of clicked for me. And I realized that she had to turn into a sitcom character. And I think, again, I have to thank Harvey for turning her into the peacock that she became. A wonderful, wonderful character. So far and away from, I mean, she was rooted in the Burnett Show mama, but she became a much, much better mama.
Tim Conway.
Oh, evil child. He's just an evil child. He's, you know, I finally got to know Tim a tiny little bit when we played parents on Yes Dear together. And it was just interesting to sit and talk to him, apart from Harvey, because, you know, they were connected at the hip. I think Tim, until Harvey died, said I have custody of Harvey. And it was just hard to ever get them separated, and hard to ever get him to be serious at all. And he's a lovely, wonderful, crazy, crazy man who maybe I learned some timing for him too, because he really knew how to push that timing to the very, very edge to where you're almost uncomfortable for him. And you all start laughing together.
How was it playing against him on Yes Dear? And was that like stunt casting, or how did that even come together?
Well, Greg Garcia, who created those characters, the story I heard is that he wanted me and Tim to play his parents because that was, you know, based on his life. So it was his choice that we would play his parents, and they stuck very, very closely to the script. They would let you ad lib, but then they'd say, could we please go back now and do it the way it was written? I guess because it was his life, he wanted it, Greg Garcia, he wanted it to go down the way he wanted it to go down. But it was a great opportunity to get to know Tim, and I just say you don't really work with Tim, you work near him.
Was there a Mama sketch on the Carol Burnett Show where he was cutting up and Mama slapped him or something like that? But that was an ad lib, or I mean, was some of that, you know?
I don't remember if I ever slapped him. I remember we got into screaming matches a few times.
Okay.
Mama and Mickey Hart.
In an ad lib way, or?
I want to say I mostly more ad libbed with Carol, with Eunice. I think I gave her more trouble than anybody.
Okay, Lyle Waggoner.
Oh, Lyle was a really good friend. In the early days of the Burnett Show, he was a newlywed and had just moved here. And gosh, I remember going home for lunch with Lyle, you know, and his wife making us lunch, and he was just a very, very good friend.
Jim Neighbors.
And actually turned out to be very funny as well, Lyle. Jim Neighbors, well, he and Carol were so very close, but just a lovely, really, really nice man.
Why did Carol call him her lucky charm?
Well, I think I don't know, you might know this better than I do from talking to Carol, but she decided to have him, because they were so close, on the very first show that she ever did. And so she was on the premiere of he was on the premiere of the Carol Burnett Show. I don't think anybody ever expected the Carol Burnett Show to go beyond 6 weeks or 8 weeks. Joe used to talk about going into the bosses at CBS to have meetings, and you know how they do the boards, the scheduling boards. Well, the Carol Burnett Show was never up there past 6 weeks, so we all knew that nobody expected us to ever be a hit. So I think because we did make it, that Carol decided that she would have him back as her first guest every season. Carol is nothing if not extremely, extremely loyal, and maybe superstitious, but there were many times that she would say, I like her, I want her on. I remember doing that with Isabel Sanford. I remember her doing it with Bernadette Peters when she saw Bernadette off Broadway in Dames at Sea. Nobody knew who Bernadette Peters was, but Carol loved her. And she was a great, great guest on our show, long before she was Bernadette Peters.
Dick Van Dyke.
Oh my God. Well, you know that I wanted to be Mary Tyler Moore. And if I could have been, I would have worked with him years prior. But I had such a love/crush on him. Just to be on the same stage with him for that whole last season was just such an honor to me, and just a thrill. And I remember staying late to watch him work. I remember the week he did the takeoff on Singin' in the Rain, and I just sat there and watched the whole darn thing. Watched him struggle through it because it was a big number for him. And he, again, was very, anal about his work, very particular and meticulous, and I just loved him. I love him.
With such an established cast, what did Dick Van Dyke add to the show that last season?
I'm not sure. I think that was a really, really difficult position for him to be put in, because I think that the chemistry of the Burnett cast was so ingrained in everybody's minds. I think that had to just be an insurmountable task to come on in the 11th season and try to replace Harvey, no matter who you are. I think it was really difficult for him. I loved him, and I loved working with him, but I think insurmountable.
So how did you meet your husband, Al Schultz, on the show?
I met Al the second season, mostly because Carol happened to see him going past her dressing room door. And we were all sitting in there shooting the breeze, she and Charlene and I, and Al walked by, and Carol said, "Who is that?" And he's got his little makeup case, and he's all dressed up. Back in the day, CBS insisted that you do jacket and tie to be a makeup man. And Al says, didn't you want to go over there my first day at work? This is his first day at CBS. He said, "I didn't want to go because I didn't want to put on a coat and a tie." So it was his first day on the job at CBS. He walks by the door, and Carol says, "Who is that?" Because he's like an old ex-football player, pretty cute. And Charlene's, who knew everything. Charlene knows all. She said, "That's Al Schultz. He's a new makeup man in the building." And Carol said, "I want him. I don't want him. I want him. I want him." And she had the head of CBS makeup doing her at the time, and she opted for Al. And Al tells a very funny story about making Carol up the very first time, and he was so nervous that he put her eyelashes on upside down. She opened her eyes, and the eyelashes were pointed down. She went, "Al?" But he was just a wreck, because it's like, I'm doing Carol Burnett. So, yeah, that's how we met. We were friends long before anything else for years. He was married, I was married.
So the Carol Burnett show lasted 11 seasons. How did you find out it wasn't coming back for a 12th season?
Carol called and said that she had decided that she wanted to go out now. She said, "It's time." We were in Hawaii on vacation. I remember her calling. And
were you surprised? What was your reaction?
Surprised. I don't know if I was surprised. Probably sad. But 11 years is a long time, and I felt like I really felt like I spent I grew up there, and well into my adulthood there. And at the time, I think I was ready.
Since this decision or announcement was made after the finale of the 11th season, was there ever any closure, or did the cast get together?
Oh, we did a lovely goodbye show. I remember doing a lovely goodbye show. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I'd have to ask her about the timing of that. I can't really remember. She must have told us before that last show, because we all knew it was the last show. So she must have called us prior.
When you came back and did a reunion show, was that a satisfying experience?
It was.
Years later?
It was. I knew it was going to be huge. She was surprised. She was so surprised. I remember her calling the day after it was on and going, "Wicks? Wicks." Surprisingly, Wicks. I don't know what it means. But she said, "Wicks, the ratings were just through the roof." She said, "And the demographic. You cannot believe the demographic." I wasn't a bit surprised. Of course, I was already on the road doing my one-woman show, and I knew that my demographic was just ridiculous. Because, that show's been on for so long, and then in the reruns for so long, and then Mama for so long, that my demographic is just ridiculous. I remember one time when I was like 22 years old, so I don't know. I've been on the show 4 or 5 years. And we always, it was really easy to go right from CBS, right over through the back gate over into Farmers Market to get lunch. And I was over there having lunch. And this gal who was like dressed to the nines in high heels and everything said, "Oh my God, I'm such a huge fan of yours." And I remember thinking, my God, she's so beautiful. And so I just remember thinking it was just kind of mind-boggling to me that she was young enough to know who we were. I felt like she was not old enough to know who we were, sort of. Just young and beautiful. And I recounted the story to Carol, and she said, "Oh, honey, it's going to get way worse. You just wait. It's going to get... You're going to be old, and people will be saying, 'I love you, and I've been watching you since I was..." Oh, I know what it was. She said, "I've been watching you since I was a little girl." But, if she was 18, she'd been watching me since she was a little girl. Yeah. It'll get much worse.
True. How do you think the Carol Burnett show changed television?
Well, I think the Carol Burnett show was like the last of the great variety shows, and it was the end of... I don't feel that old, but I feel like, oh my God, I got to touch the golden age of television. It was like right at the tail end of it. And we were the last great one, but I would say arguably the best. I don't know. It's just such great memories for so many people that I just feel really fortunate to have been, to even be associated. I emailed Carol this morning. I said, "This is all your fault, and I feel underqualified and I don't know, unworthy, sort of,
Wow.
to have been snatched up and thrown here, by my no doing of my own, really." And I know she says no, but that's not how I feel.
Well, how do you feel about your contribution to the show? Or what?
I feel like I finally got there. But, I think they would all say, "Well, no shit, you had awfully goddamn good teachers. You should have gotten there." I know, although I think nowadays, as geeky as I was in the beginning, the way television is nowadays, I think probably the Suits would come downstairs and say, "Get rid of her and get an actress now." I don't know what happened to me would happen in the real world nowadays.
So when you did the reunion special, I guess 14 years later, had the cast kept in touch with each other? Or was
Not
it,
as well as we should have, probably.
Was it not just a reunion for television, but a true reunion?
It was lovely for all of us. And I remember at the end of the week, we all looked at each other and said, "How the hell did we do this every week?" It was exhausting.
So how did the idea come up for the character of Mama to be spun off into a sitcom, first on NBC?
Well, actually, it came about in the, I think it was the 9th season of the Burnett Show, and Joe came to me and he said, "We want you to spin Mama off." And I said no. I said I had just spent 9 months being pregnant. I didn't want to be an old lady every week. He said, "But I have a deal. We can spin you off." I said, "But what if it doesn't? What about Carol and Harvey?" He said, "Well, they can make a guest appearance." I said, "But what if it doesn't work?" He said, "Then you'll come back here." I said, "With my tail tucked between my legs? No, I don't want to be old and I don't want to be fat. I don't want to do it." And he was upset with me. Carol, on the other hand, said, "Yay, this means we get to keep doing it on my show." So we finished the Burnett Show. We did more families, God knows. And about a year after the Burnett Show went off the air, Carol commissioned a special for CBS called Eunice, and it was a 90-minute special. And I remember her bringing it out to me. I was lying by the pool in Hawaii, and she came out and threw it under my nose. I was face down on a chaise lounge. She threw it under my nose. She said, "Read this, see if you want to do it." And I read it, and I said, "Well, it's good, but Mama dies at the end." And I said, "It's not even a good death scene." And she said, "Don't be greedy. You want to do this or not?" And I said, yes, of course. Well, we did it, and CBS held it for quite a while. They didn't think it was going to do much. I remember Carol calling us, me and Al, called us up to her house to to watch a screening of it, dinner and watch the movie. And my husband, who is nothing if not half Greek, said to me as we were pulling into the drive, he said, "You just get ready for them to, here we're going to go with the serious thing again. You just get ready." And I swear, no sooner had the credits rolled, come up at the end of the screening, than Carol and Joe and Harvey were all on me, going, "You have to do this as a series. You have to. You don't need us. You have got to do it." And Carol said, "Sweetie, you need to do this for you." She said, "It's going to be a slam dunk." And I said, "Well, what about you guys?" She said, "We'll come and visit you, but you don't need us." And this was started the whole Mama's Family.
So what was the response to Eunice?
It did amazingly well in the ratings. I was nominated for an Emmy, and I remember the year I was nominated against all these serious actresses. I can't, like Claire Bloom was nominated for Brideshead Revisited. It was like, because the categories are so funny. The category was special, but it's not comedy special, and Harvey just went no flippin' way. But really, sweetie, congratulations. So proud of you. Yeah. They got a great reaction.
Now Carol and Joe Hamilton, they split up. Was the timing about the time that Mama's Family started?
It was.
Did Joe own the character, or was there sort of an ownership issue? Or
Joe Hamilton Productions owned the characters for television, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were in the midst of going through a really nasty divorce, so again, I don't know a lot of the details about what actually happened, but
so when Mama's Family started as a network series on NBC, what kind of creative input did you have, if any, at that point?
I had a lot. As I told you, I didn't like it in the beginning.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was funny, and said to Joe, "We need to shut it down, and we need to bring Harvey in to direct." And he went along with that. And I remember him saying to Al one time, "Trust her instincts. You have to trust her instincts, always, even if you don't agree." And Al has never forgotten that. I've never forgotten it.
Was it a big adjustment for you to go from doing sketch comedy to doing like a sitcom, a series like that?
Well, in the sense that the character really had to grow and blossom and become a different character, and we had to get the writing right, which I think we did. We got it together, thankfully, and it became a really silly, wonderful show. And yeah, I remember we did one show one time where Mama's brother-in-law comes home. He's a merchant marine, and he comes rolling into Raytown, and they end up in the sack together. Mama's a widow. And I read the script, and I said, "You guys," I went to the writers, I said, "I'm sorry, she is nothing if not Bible Belt. She would never sleep with her brother-in-law. I don't care how dead her husband is. This is wrong, 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 wrong." Well, it threw everything into a tizzy, and Joe said, "Gotta listen to her." And they rewrote the second half of the show. So yeah, I had input.
Did you find comedic timing from sketch to sitcom different, or not so much?
Not so much, no.
So let me just kind of word association a little bit. Some of the cast members of the first kind of incarnation of Mama's Family. Ken Berry.
My right arm. Kenny is just, he is just so quietly strong. He's so good, and he would tell you otherwise. But he is just like having an anchor at your side. He is just so consistent and so good.
He played Benton, and then Dorothy Lyman.
Oh my God! Well, Dorothy we found because Carol had us all hooked on All My Children, and we were all in love with Opal Gardner. And when we got ready to cast, we all said, "What about bringing her in? She would be perfect." She was. And she was bi-coastal for quite some time. She would run in and do Mama's Family and run back and do All My Children, and she called it All My Paychecks.
Rue McClanahan.
Oh, my God. Nuts. She was just meticulous about her craft. I remember her driving the prop guy nuts, because the props, they couldn't just be props. They had to be the actual thing. She had to really work with the actual thing. So he had to get everything right from Monday morning. It had to be right. And he used to drive her crazy. But she was just so meticulous and so deep into that character. And again, I think like a really good actress who's a comedian. Able to just, skate on that line like Harvey.
And Betty White.
Oh, well, Betty, I have often said I aspire to be Betty White. I hope I grow up to be like Betty White, although she's working so damn hard now, I'm not sure Geez, don't you want to take a little time off? But I adore her. I have gotten so much wonderful advice from her over the years, and just I would always just aspire to be her. I think she's a wonderful lady.
When Carol came back to play Eunice on Mama's Family, the series, did you fall into the same kind of rhythms? Was it a comfortable zone that you were in?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. How did the viewers like it, the NBC version? And the critics.
Our viewership on NBC was not bad. I think the problem with NBC was Grant Tinker was the head of NBC when he greenlighted Mama's Family, without really much approval or enthusiasm from any of the young guns. So they didn't, number one, understand a rural comedy, which Hollywood almost has never understood, and yet they are some of the best stuff that we have to look back on are the rural comedies. Right. But they didn't understand that, and they also they just did not understand a young woman playing an old woman. They just didn't get it. And so the whole thing, we were at odds with the network from the get-go. They'd put us in a time slot, and when we would start winning it, they'd move us to a more difficult, or we're moving you next to Magnum PI. Oh, great. And then when we'd start doing well there, they'd say, we're moving you next to Love Boat. They just kept moving us and making it more and more difficult until I think they felt that they had the, whatever ammunition it was, they felt they needed to cancel us.
So there was a gap of time before it went into syndication?
Yeah, like about a year and a half before we went into first-run syndication. It was during that time that Al and I just fully up and moved to Hawaii. When
NBC canceled it, did you think it was over? I mean, it was like dead, or that syndication would be in the future?
No, I figured it was over.
So how did that happen? Was that Joe Hamilton, or how did it become syndicated?
No. What happened was that Laura Marr merged with Telepictures, and all the young guns at Telepictures, who were all about the syndication, got to looking at they were looking for projects, and they said, let's look for instance at Mama's Family. It was a hit. The demographic was phenomenal. It just never got the shot that it needed. Let's take it and put it into first-run syndication. It's going to be a huge hit. And it was those young guys that said, this is a show that never had a chance. And they put us into first-run syndication. And at the time, the only show I can remember that was in first-run syndication was Too Close for Comfort. And I thought, well, I guess if Ted Knight can do it, I can do it. And there we were out at this little studio that really didn't have a lot of amenities and sort of felt like a little orphan child. But I have to say, they left us alone. They didn't meddle at all like the networks can do. They were hands off. You send them an episode, they'd send you a check. And they did not meddle at all. Consequently, we had so much fun when we were in syndication. That show just ran like a top. I was really lucky enough to take much of the staff from the Burnett show. So the schedule ran smoothly. It was, by the time we finished Mama's Family, we were down to a 4-day work week. I mean, it was like the little Energizer Bunny. We all wished it would just keep running forever and ever, but they said, no, we have enough episodes to syndicate now, so we're pulling the plug. The one thing I do regret, and I'll tell you this because this is the Academy, I regret that we were orphans and that we were not allowed to be nominated for anything, because I think Judging by my fans and the comments that I get now, we're like a classic sitcom.
Right.
And one that people revere highly when they're talking about their favorite sitcoms. And yet, we were a little bastard child who was not really allowed to be recognized.
Yeah.
So I think it was much after Mama's Family was off, and I believe it was Buffy the Vampire Slayer that started finally got the ball rolling.
Right. And then cable shows.
And now
too.
cable is, kind of dominating much of the, it is.
What was different about the syndicated version versus the network version of Mom's Family?
Just, well, I have to say honestly, I thought the cast that Joe put together, we really gelled and really just had a good time. Really found our footing. Like second season on, well, syndication on, we just really found our footing. We got into a lovely rhythm. And like I said, there was no meddling. And the writing was awesome. And the characters were so well defined. And it was just really a lot of fun.
And Rue McClanahan and Betty White went on to do the Golden Girls.
Between the time that we were on the network and the time that we went to syndication, I lost both Betty White and Rue McClanahan to the Golden Girls. Both of them. And they didn't take me with them. So, yeah. So that precipitated changing the whole cast around. And but ultimately, we really found our footing.
So Ken Berry and Dorothy Lyman continued. Let me just mention a couple of the cast members and maybe a comment. Beverly Archer, who played Iola.
Beverly Archer walked in to audition for Iola, and I went, well, for God's sake, why are we even wasting our time? She was just perfectly Iola. Just one, and so great to work with. So fun and great to work with.
And then Alan Kaiser and Bubba.
Well, again, he walked in, and I said, well, he's a natural redhead like I am, and he's adorable like I am, so he must be my grandson.
So Mama's Family was very successful in syndication.
Mm-hmm.
Was it a matter of a lot of combination of things, the gelling, the fact that you had, people knew where to find you, the writing, all of it just sort of came together?
I think so. The writers were on such a perfect roll. Dave Powers came, Dave came all the way from the Burnett Show through the network version to Mama's Family with me, and he was a great director to work with. I mean, he'd have all kinds of, the things I remember about loving Mama's Family were we would do a lot of prop stuff. Like there would be entire scenes in the kitchen with lots of props, and he would have much of it worked out like a choreographer by the time we would get there, and it was just so fun to do that stuff. And I remember when I did Hannah Montana, one of the first things I said to Miley Cyrus was, make your props your friends. The producers said, we want them to learn from really seasoned performers like you. And Miley's like a little sponge, so we want you to teach her. And that was one of the first things we talked about, because we had this scene to do where we were in the kitchen and there was lots of stuff to juggle, and I said, make your props your friends. And a really funny story was at the very end of Hannah Montana when I did a little scene with Miley. And it was one of the very last shows. And we were in a tea room, all dressed up, have to get to the table, have to get rid of your purses and do the scene. And we run it a second time, and I'm holding my purse, and I said, I don't know where, I can't go here on the table, it's going to block the flowers. Miley, what did you do with your purse? She said, I hung it on the back of my chair, Vicki, make your props your friends.
That's a sponge.
Yeah.
Did the syndicated Mama's Family stop because they had a certain number for syndication, basically, because it was doing well?
I know.
So what is it about that? What is it about the show that makes it timeless and it still has appeal? I mean, people love the character and love the show.
Well, it was sort of set in some kind of a time warp. You don't know if you can put your finger on what time period that is, almost. And I think Mama, because everybody knows her. Everybody has a Mama in their family. I've often said that I think she's kind of like Archie Bunker in that we all know him. We all have one of him in our family. None of us will ever fess up to being him, so none of us are ever offended by him. And I think Mama's a lot the same way. And the show, I think, to me, because it's just silly, and those are some of our favorite shows to sit back and watch. you don't have to think about Mama's Family. There's nothing sexual. There's nothing dark. There's nothing cynical. There's no message. It's just silly, good laughing for no good reason.
Now, the writers you had on that staff, they were not the original writers, right? They were, I mean, the ones who had the battles and...
Oh, no, I think honestly they just felt so emotionally attached. I think maybe he had passed away by then. And she was so emotionally attached to that character and needed Mama to be angry so badly
right.
for whatever reason
Yeah.
that she couldn't kind of let go of her and let her be fun. She just didn't understand Mama being fun.
Did you watch those shows back then? When you did you ever watch them on the air? The syndicated Mama's Family.
The syndicated
Yeah.
version all the time. Oh my gosh, I was in New York doing a commercial a few years ago, and Al had stayed home because it was one of those really quick trips. So he calls me in the morning to check in. How are you doing? I said, well, I'm sitting here in my beautiful suite that they gave me with my beautiful linens, eating my beautiful breakfast, watching Mama's Family, and laughing my ass off because it was just. I laugh at her when I see her like she's not me. She's probably the only character I've ever done that I think she's a really funny lady. I really like her, but I don't feel like it's me.
And you still feel that way if you see episodes
I
now?
do. If I see episodes, I'll sit there and just laugh. She's funny.
Now, you've been touring with a show called Vicki, Lawrence, and Mama, a two-woman show, and you've been doing that for like 10 years or so?
Yeah.
How is that gratifying to bring that character back? As both a way to comment on, as Mama would about things today, and also to see how audiences react still?
Yeah. Well, I decided to put the show together on the heels of the first big Burnett reunion because the audience reaction was so overwhelming, voracious for anything Burnett.
Yeah.
And Harvey and Tim had been on the road for some time, and they'd been having a lot of success. And Harvey said to me, "I don't know why you're not doing this. You would love it. It's yours. You get to do what you want to do."
Yeah.
And I knew, of course, that I had to bring Mama out of the closet because I think people... Honestly, sometimes I think nobody would miss me as long as Mama was still around. Nobody would really miss Vicki. So I knew she had to be the second half of the show, but I knew that I had to be the first half because I need to be me before I'm not anymore. So, so I made the first half of the show. We literally pushed the furniture back here in the living room and said, "Let's put a show together," just like Judy Garland and Mickey Rooney. And I literally got people that I trusted, a producer from Mama's Family, my writing partner that I've had forever since I did my talk show. Al, a friend that does musical stuff, a stage manager from Mama's Family. We literally just pushed the furniture back and said, let's put a show together. And I said, I know the first half is going to be autobiographical. I know from going out and doing speeches what people want to hear about me. I know everything that they would ask if we bumped the lights up and did questions and answers like Carol used to. So it's, by the end of my half of the show, you know more about me than you ever wanted to know. And then we put together a bunch of outtakes from Mama's Family, and then Mama comes on. And I said when we put the show together, I can't be retrospective because I won't have fun doing that. And I need this to be fun for me, or it's not going to be fun to be on the road. So I said I want her to push the envelope. I want to bring her into the new century. I want her to comment on what's in the news, and I want her to be topical. And I want her to rap, and my writing partner said, rap? I said, well, she should rap. Yeah, we'd rap about her life. Yeah. And so, she does a rap song, and she does a finale, and it's been really, really fun to just keep pushing her ahead. And thank you, Harvey. She does that beautifully. And she gets to stay very topical. If there's something in the news that I would like to speak about that I would not dare speak about, Mama gets to do it. She gets all the good jokes. She gets all the good rants.
All the jokes. Well, so it's fun for you. Has it been fun for the audience?
Oh my gosh, I think the audience just loves seeing her in person. Yeah, and it's great to get in their faces. Yeah.
Let's talk about some of the other things that have been going on in your career. The Night the Lights Went Out in Georgia, huge #1 hit. How did that come about?
Well, I was married just ever so briefly to the guy that wrote that song, and he hated it. He didn't like it.
It was Bobby Russell.
Bobby Russell, who wrote Little Green Apples and Honey, I would say were his biggest hits. So he wrote The Night That Lights Out in Georgia. He didn't really love it. He was in a studio demoing material one night, and I said, well, what about Georgia? Because I liked it. And he said, I hate it. I don't like that song. And I said, you need to demo it because it's a hit. I'm telling you, it's a huge hit. So he said, well, why don't you do the demo? Because I really hate it. And we brought it out to his producer, Snuff Garrett, who said he liked it. He said, I think it's a pretty good song. And they could not give that thing away. He thought he wanted to work with Liza Minnelli. He said, I'm going to give it to Liza Minnelli. I said, this is not a Liza Minnelli song. And so then he finally said he'd recorded a lot with Cher. He said, I'm going to send it over to Cher. Well, Sonny heard it and said it's going to offend the South, and Cher won't do it. It needs to be completely rewritten. Bobby said, I hate the song. I'm not rewriting it. So Snuff said, fine, let's just go in the studio and do it with Vicki. And I believe till the day he passed away, it was his record holder. He had that thing. He laid down the track. I had put on the vocal. I had overdubbed the vocal. I had done all of the harmony parts. He had it mixed and mastered and in the mail to New York in 3 hours. And he said, this is my record holder. To this day, I hear that thing and I say, God, I wish I could do that harmony part just one more time. But he was like on some sort of a mission, I guess, to get that thing done in a hurry. I'm the one that lobbied so hard for Artie Butler to arrange it because I love his work. Would not have been Snuff's choice, was not Snuff's choice for the album when we went in to finish the album. And I wish Artie had done the album with me. But yeah, and Artie was responsible for taking the silly little song that Bobby wrote and giving it that whole minor, mysterious kind of sound that it had. It was, that was really his doing.
Now, this was like 1972.
It was a good collaboration.
72 is like the midst of the Carol Burnett show. Was this a happy surprise when this was just went crazy on radio and you know?
Well, it was a long, grueling process. It was like giving birth. It took like 8.5 months for it to become a hit. You know, and back in those days, the producer stuff would call and say, hey, we got WKRQ in Arkansas. Hey, we got WPMS in Minnesota. And I'm going, but when am I going to hear it in L.A.? It was 8.5 months. And finally, you know, I hear it on the radio, and I'm like, geez, finally I've got a hit. And also, they did not put it on the Burnett show until it was a #1 hit. So it wasn't like, oh my God. And people could never figure out that Vicki from the Carol Burnett show was Vicki that was singing the song. Nobody could ever sort that whole thing out.
So you got a gold record for this.
I did.
Did you consider briefly changing careers and becoming a recording artist?
You know, it was the ultimate demise of an already doomed marriage, and it was such a bittersweet kind of a thing. It was difficult to go in the studio and finish the album because I was going through divorce by then. I was like, could I please just go back to comedy? No, not so much. And there's so many singers that are so much better than I am, but I'm thrilled that I have a juggernaut under my belt. And I'm on a very short list of people that can do a medley of their hit.
Well, I think the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had a one-hit wonder display a few years ago, and I'm pretty sure that was among the songs.
It certainly should be.
Why do you think it became a hit? I mean,
it's a great song.
Yeah.
It was a great record.
And the arrangement you talked about.
It was a great record, and it was a great song.
Now, Reba McEntire remade it, or okay? Let's talk about that after we change the tape.